Welcome to Bakes and Blenders. Today we are going to be making this gorgeous tiramisu layer cake. It's got layers of vanilla cake brushed with a rum-spiked coffee syrup, filled with a mascarpone pastry cream dusted with dark cocoa powder. It's covered in an ombre buttercream, and on top we've got a little crescent decoration heavily dusted in more dark cocoa powder. Let's start off by making that coffee syrup. Add water and sugar to a small saucepan and stir to combine. Bring the mixture to a boil and continue to cook for 1 minute. Add the espresso powder, stir, and remove the mixture from the heat. I made this coffee syrup a few days in advance, so just pouring it into a mason jar, and I'll store that in the fridge until I need it. Don't worry, I didn't forget about that rum, it's coming later. To make the hybrid buttercream, start by combining the pasteurized egg whites from a carton with about half of the powdered sugar in a stand mixer. Whisk this for several minutes. I like to start on a slow speed and gradually work up to a medium-high speed. If there's powdered sugar that just isn't incorporating, stop your mixer and go ahead and scrape the sides down just to get that incorporated. With the mixer on a medium speed, we can start to incorporate all of the butter 1 tablespoon at a time. If you are a beginner buttercream maker, you might want to check out my intro to buttercream video. It's up on your screen right now. I'll put a link down below as well. I also have a free buttercream course for beginners, and I'll put the link for that down below as well. Once all of the butter has been added, increase your speed to medium-high and continue to whip that buttercream for a couple more minutes. Stop and scrape the bowl down, and we're going to switch to a paddle attachment. And we're going to beat the buttercream just a little bit more. After a few minutes, I'm going to start adding the rest of my powdered sugar to the buttercream. In total, it'll be about anywhere from 2 to 4 additions of powdered sugar. After each addition, beat to combine, scrape the bowl down, then add some more powdered sugar and repeat until all of your powdered sugar is well incorporated into the buttercream. Scrape the bowl down, then add your vanilla. I'm using vanilla bean paste, and then beat that to combine it. Now we've got this gorgeous creamy vanilla buttercream, but we want to create an ombre effect, so we're going to divide this into 3 separate portions. We want 1 large portion of vanilla buttercream because we're going to use this to crumb coat our cake and decorate the top, and then we want 2 smaller portions of a light cocoa flavor and a dark cocoa flavor. I kind of wish that I had waited until after crumb coating my cake before doing this division, but this is how I did it. You can find links to these recipes in the description box below this video. To 1 portion of the small amount of buttercream, I added 1 teaspoon of dark cocoa powder. Now, at first I was a little concerned that 1 teaspoon was going to be too dark, so I started by just adding half a teaspoon, mixed that in, and then I added another half of a teaspoon. And I was really happy with how this medium light cocoa color turned out. For the last portion of buttercream, I added a tablespoon of dark cocoa powder, sifted that in, and gave it a nice stir. It is very important that you sift the cocoa powder into your buttercream to avoid any lumps of cocoa powder in your final buttercream. You should end up with 1 white portion of buttercream, which is large, a small light brown buttercream portion, and a small dark brown buttercream portion. If you want either of your chocolate buttercreams to be darker, just add a small amount of dark cocoa powder at a time until you're happy with it. Let's make that mascarpone pastry cream. In a small saucepan, add your sugar, flour, salt, and then whisk to combine. Gradually whisk in the whole milk. Heat this mixture over medium heat and bring it to just a bare simmer. You want it to be hot but not boiling. Once the milk mixture is hot, you're going to temper your egg yolk by whisking the egg yolk and then gradually whisking in small portions of that hot milk. If you're enjoying this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you can see more of my videos. After you've added most of the milk mixture, but it doesn't have to be all, and it's well whisked, you can add the egg yolk mixture back to the saucepan with the remaining milk mixture. Stir well to combine. Now place the saucepan over medium-low heat and we're going to bring it to a boil. Remember to whisk constantly as you cook it to prevent any scorching on the bottom. It will also help prevent any curdling. With this small amount of pastry cream and the constant whisking, you might not actually see the mixture boil. So if you miss any bubbles, what you're looking for is the pastry cream will become very thick, start to hold its shape, and it'll be nice and glossy as well, and smooth. Once you believe it's boiling, you've seen a bubble, or it's just thickened quite a bit, you're going to continue to stir and cook the mixture for another 30 seconds. Now we're going to pass our pastry cream through a sieve to remove any lumps or curdling that may have occurred, and we're going to stir in the butter and vanilla. The butter should be still cold. This is going to help bring the temperature of the pastry cream down. Continue to stir as the butter melts. This might take a little bit of time, but just be patient. Once the butter is completely melted, you're going to press some cling wrap straight onto the surface of the cream. Let the pastry cream cool on the counter just until it's room temperature, which should not take long. Then cover the bowl and put it in the fridge until it is nice and cold. I like to prepare this the night before, and then we'll continue the next day. So I've let my cold pastry cream and mascarpone cheese sit on the counter for just 30 minutes so that they can kind of warm up slightly. I'm using an electric hand mixer just to loosen up the mascarpone cream. I'm not trying to incorporate a lot of air, just trying to get it loose and spreadable. Now you can begin adding the vanilla pastry cream a little bit at a time. I added my pastry cream to the mascarpone in about 3 additions, and the reason I did it like this instead of all at once is because I didn't want to end up with any ugly lumps. That wouldn't be cool. Now, my pastry cream did turn out a little runnier than I expected, but that's perfectly okay because the mascarpone is stiff enough, and at the end, you should end up with this gorgeous, spreadable mascarpone pastry cream. Then you can put that delicious mascarpone pastry cream back into the container, cover it, and put it in the fridge until you're ready to fill your cake. In a glass measuring cup, combine your whole milk and your sour cream and give that a good whisk. Since these 2 ingredients were cold, I'm going to pop them in the microwave for 20 to 30 seconds just to bring them to room temperature. Now pour half of that mixture into a second measuring glass, should be about 6 ounces. Then add your vanilla, give that a little whisk, and you can set that aside. To the other portion of milk, add all 4 of your eggs, give that a very thorough whisk, and you can set that aside as well. In the bowl of a stand mixer, go ahead and sift together your sugar, cake flour, cake enhancer if you're using it, baking powder, and salt. Mix on low to combine your dry ingredients. Now add the softened but still slightly cool butter to your dry ingredients. We're going to mix this on a low speed until the butter is completely incorporated into the dry ingredients. Now, you might notice that this is not the usual method for making cakes, and that's because we are using the reverse creaming method here. By coating the flour with butter before we add our liquid ingredients, it's going to help prevent the formation of gluten, which is what gives you a tough, dense cake. When your butter is fully incorporated, your mixture should probably look like sand. You shouldn't see any large chunks of butter. If you have any butter when you add your liquid ingredients, you're going to have a problem with your cake. This is actually take 2 on this cake because I had to rebake it. My first cake had big butter lumps in it and the batter was just a disaster. I'll show that in another video at some point. Now add the milk and vanilla mixture and beat on a low speed for 30 seconds, then increase the speed slightly for another 30 seconds. Scrape the bowl down, and then we're going to add our egg and milk mixture in about 3 to 4 additions. Drizzle a portion of the mixture into the cake batter while the stand mixer is on a low speed. Then increase the speed slightly to a medium-low speed for 30 seconds. Occasionally stop and scrape down your bowl to make sure that there are no ingredients stuck on the bottom of the bowl. After the last addition of the egg milk mixture has been incorporated, you're going to beat the cake batter on a medium-high speed for 30 seconds. Divide the batter evenly between your 3 6-inch cake pans. You want to aim for about 14 to 15 ounces of batter each, max. I slightly overfilled my pans. It all worked out, but I wish I had kept it under 15 ounces. Then I wrapped my cake pans with my pre-soaked baking strips. This is what helps give me a nice flat cake. And I used a skewer to make sure there were no air bubbles in my batter. It also helps level out the batter. Pop the cake pans in an oven that's preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit and bake for about 50 to 55 minutes. And just a reminder, you can find the link to every recipe you see in this video down in the description box below, or just pop over to bakesandblenders.com and search tiramisu layer cake. When they're done, cool in their pans for about 15 minutes. Then loosen the edges of the cake from the cake pan and invert them onto another cooling rack. Guys, let me just tell you, I almost wanted to cry a little bit when I lifted that one cake pan up, because this was the second time I had made this cake, and then I had gone and sliced off the corner of it when I was running that spatula around the edge of the pan. Anyways, just let the cake layers cool upside down on the cooling rack for another 15 minutes. Now flip your cake layers right side up and let them cool for another 15 minutes. At this point, they should be basically cool, but probably still a little bit warm. That's perfect. We're going to wrap these up. First, I wrap each cake layer in some cling wrap, and then I wrap that in some press and seal to make sure that they are nice and airtight. I'm going to put them in the fridge to chill because we want our cake layers to be cold when we go to assemble our cake. Now, by wrapping the cakes up before they're completely cool, we're trapping that moisture in, and so that's going to make sure that our cake stays nice, gloriously moist and soft. Grab that coffee syrup we made way back at the beginning of this video, and we're going to mix in a tablespoon of dark rum. I've got my cold cake layers out of the fridge, and I'm going to start by just trimming the top of the cake off. This ensures that our cake layers are all the same height, and it's going to allow our coffee syrup to really soak into that layer. Use a pastry brush to liberally brush some of that coffee syrup over your cake layer. You won't actually use a ton, but you do want to make sure you've got a nice even coverage. You can find links to the products that I've used in the description box below this video. Make sure all of your cake layers are trimmed, but you're actually only going to be brushing 2 of your cake layers with the coffee syrup. After you're done brushing those 2 layers of cake, set them aside so the syrup has a little bit of time to soak in before we assemble the cake. Now, I decided to have my slightly shaved cake layer as my top layer because that one's going to go upside down, and I can kind of patch that damage up with buttercream. Spread a little bit of buttercream on a 6-inch cake round and top with your first cake layer. Pipe a border of vanilla buttercream around the edge of the cake. I'm using a 2A, and then fill in the center with your mascarpone pastry cream. Use a small offset spatula to make everything as smooth, even, and level. Then generously dust this mascarpone cream with some dark cocoa powder. I just got this little duster thing. I love it. It's so much fun. I'll put a link to it in the description box below. Now we're going to repeat this process with the second layer of cake. If you'd like a more in-depth tutorial on how to fill and stack a 1-tier cake, check out the link that's on your screen right now, and I'll also put a link down below to my video tutorial. The last cake layer is the one that is not brushed with coffee syrup. We're going to put that on upside down. In theory, you've got a nice flat bottom from being in the pan. I just shaved some of mine off. Oopsies. Time for the crumb coat. We're going to cover the entire cake in a nice thin layer of vanilla buttercream to trap any crumbs and give us a good base to work with. Cool thing about cake decorating. You saw how I kind of sliced off the corner of my cake layer about half the way around. You know, that's a pretty sizable chunk. But because I put that as my top layer, it's not part of the structure of the cake. I'm able to use buttercream to create these sharp corners that from the outside of the cake, you wouldn't know anything was wrong. So just keep that in mind. If you do have a small mistake with your cake that has nothing to do with the flavor, texture, or quality of the actual product, you've just kind of maybe broken it a little bit in one place, it might be possible to salvage, so don't despair. Now it's time to pop the cake into the fridge so our crumb coat has time to set and firm up. I would suggest doing this for about 30 minutes. Now, I always use acrylic cake discs to frost my cake. That's my secret to getting those sharp edges and those straight sides. If you're not familiar with how to use acrylic cake discs, check out my tutorial. I'll put a link on the screen and in the description box below. Now, a classic tiramisu makes me think of those ladyfinger sponges soaking up the coffee syrup, and then you've got the mascarpone cream filling, and then you've got the cocoa powder dusting. There's a lot of gradients between dark brown all the way up to a cream color. With that in mind, I decided to do an ombre effect with like a dark chocolate bottom going up to just plain vanilla buttercream. So to create that, I'm doing a band of plain vanilla buttercream up top and a band of the darker chocolate buttercream on the bottom third. And then in the center, we've got that lighter chocolate buttercream that I'm piping around. As you scrape and smooth your cake, once you're getting to that point where you're kind of almost done, use your offset spatula to kind of wiggle the frosting between the different bands of frosting. This is going to help make a more smooth ombre effect instead of just band, band, band. They're going to blend into each other. If you find that your buttercream is still looking a little too distinct in the different shades, use different colored buttercream to kind of patch up above and below that demarcation line to create a more blurred effect. At the end, make sure to heat up your cake scraper with either hot water or a kitchen torch to get a nice, smooth, shiny finish. Pop the cake back in the fridge to chill until the buttercream is all set. To create that really cool crescent-shaped design I've got on top of my tiramisu layer cake, I've got a 4-inch acrylic cake disc that I'm using as my guide, placing it on top of the cake and then just using a toothpick to trace around it. Then I'm taking that disc away and I'm left with a crescent shape. You can't see it on the video, but trust me, it's there. Now I'm going to plop dollops of my extra mascarpone pastry cream on top of the cake within this crescent shape. I had wanted to use vanilla buttercream, it would just be much more stable. However, I did not have enough vanilla buttercream. I had plenty of the light chocolate and the darker chocolate buttercream, but that just wasn't going to give me the visual I wanted. I'm using a 2A piping tip, but any large round piping tip will work just fine. It's important that you make sure to stay within that crescent shape, and you'll see why soon. After I've piped all of my dollops, I'm going to put the 4-inch cake disc back to block off that circle of cake that I have not decorated. Now I can use my really cool duster tool to sprinkle the top of the cake with dark cocoa powder. Carefully remove the small disc and tidy up any smudges. Because I went over the line I had drawn, I had to squish a few dollops when I put the disc on, so I just used an offset spatula to clean it up. Then just use a dry pastry brush to clean off any excess dark cocoa powder from your cake stand. And there you have it, an absolutely gorgeous tiramisu layer cake. I absolutely love how that crescent design turned out. It's easy to make, but it's unique, it's beautiful, and it gives you that visual of, hey, this is a tiramisu cake. And speaking of the cake, absolutely delicious. The vanilla cake layers are soft and moist, so delicious. You've got just that hint of coffee syrup on the top, the creamy mascarpone filling, the cocoa powder dusted between the layers on top and in the buttercream. It's absolutely magical. Thank you so much for watching this video on Bakes and Blenders today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you might want to check out the recipe for my coffee cake layer cake. That one is another stunner. I'll see you in the next video. Happy baking!